Good morning. I see we have some attendees starting to join us. I want to welcome you all. I am Michael Hogue. I'm Vice President for Workforce Development here at WireNet. We thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Emerging Trends in U.S. Apprenticeships, presented by WireNet. We're excited to tap some local expertise that's been active in this space for quite a while and are at the forefront of some of the evolutions bringing a 75-year tradition of talent development into the 21st century and helping manufacturers be proactive in attacking the growing skills gap dilemma. Advance the slide. For those of you unfamiliar with WireNet, we're celebrating 30 years of dedication to strengthening Northeast Ohio through support of manufacturing firms. Basically, we help manufacturers thrive to ensure their economic impact continues to strengthen our region. This slide illustrates our span of programming that all revolves around our motto, where manufacturing matters. What matters to manufacturers today is talent development. Our recent manufacturing survey bears this out, with 88% of respondents claiming that attracting talent is difficult, and many of those believe it's negatively impacting their profitability. So, learning about talent development best practices was a top training topic requested. Advanced slide. Please feel free to submit questions as they come to mind. We'll save time at the end to respond to as many as possible and promise to wrap up promptly at noon. Use the conversation box on the left side of your screen to type in any questions that you have as we move through the presentation. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Craig McAtee. Craig serves as the Executive Director of the National Coalition of Advanced Technology Centers and is a Workforce Development Executive with Tooling U SME. We'll also hear from David Bredenbeck, the Senior Program Manager for Precision Machining and Apprenticeships at Cuyahoga Community College. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Craig to share with us how what's old is new again in manufacturing apprenticeship. Craig, take it away.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. Probably some of these information bits that I'll share are familiar to the folks on the webinar, but obviously, as Mike said, the skills gap, especially in manufacturing and technology jobs, is continuing to widen. As you see the numbers, there are 2 million expected to go unfilled between now and 2025. And so obviously there's a lot of reasons for that. I think the next slide gives us a quick overview of the gray tsunami, as we call it. But basically it's the retirements of the baby boomers and, of course, the economic expansion that we're seeing across the nation in manufacturing due to a lot of good policies being changed, as well as just growth in the worldwide economy. But over the next decade, 3.5 million manufacturing jobs will likely need to be filled. And these data points come from the National Association of Manufacturing and the Manufacturing Institute. They've got a really good pulse on what's going on in the United States. And that's what we're here to talk about more. How do we fill those skills gaps? How do we be more creative with bringing old, as Mike said, apprenticeship models into the 21st century and continue to improve those for small and medium-sized companies as well. Next slide. I just want to go over what we have talked about across the nation over the last few years with the common myths about apprenticeship. And we've got 7. A lot of times you'll see 6, but I want to start with number 1 is a lot of folks, especially small and medium manufacturers, believe that the apprenticeship program is just too bureaucratic and difficult. And I'm here to say that there have been a lot of improvements over the last 5 years with infusion of millions and millions of dollars from the administrations for Department of Labor to improve their processes, streamline those registration systems, as well as spread out the registrations to local community-based organizations like WireNet and community colleges like Tri-C and Lorraine around this area. Number two, myth is apprenticeship programs are just for construction and skilled craft occupation. You know, one of the best things that has happened over the last 75 years is the construction industry has truly rallied around the apprenticeship model. And that's one of those things that you can certainly hold up as an example. But manufacturing has as well, but not as much as it could. And I think when we hear from Dave Bredenbeck in a minute, he'll share some of those best practices and what he's experienced as well. But it's really blooming beyond this. We've got apprenticeships in IT, we've got apprenticeships in healthcare, we've got apprenticeships in banking, etc. So those things are continuing to grow, and that is really why we're talking about this today. Myth number three, you'll hear out there that apprenticeships are just for big companies like Boeing and Lockheed Martin, and Toyota, and Nissan, and require a large number of apprentices. Well, that's unfortunately not true either, or fortunately it's not true, in that a lot of small and medium-sized companies have banded together around a great nucleus like a community college or a CBO like WireNet, and really figured out how to track apprenticeship programs into their small and medium-sized companies, as well as band together to share those resources so they don't have to invest a lot of money and time. I think the next slide will show, but 90% of apprentices come from your incumbent workforce. Now, myth number four is if I train the apprentices, they'll just leave. Well, of course, a lot of folks, I would hope, on this call or this webinar would realize if you don't train them and they stay, are you not worse off? The bottom line is training apprentices is more of a loyalty approach and a much more structured approach, which really gives you the benefit of both. And we'll talk about those as we move forward in this webinar as well. Number five myth is basically if I become an apprentice, I will have to make a choice between work and college. And I'm here to say that over the last 20 years, community colleges specifically have been at the forefront of rewarding credit for many of the courses that they are partnering with industry in, as well as the on-the-job learning. And you'll hear a lot more about that as Dave Bredenbeck takes the stage in a minute. Myth number six is that apprenticeships are for newly hired employees. I touched on that a minute ago. Again, 90% of apprentices that we see across the nation in small, medium, and large companies are incumbent workers, where the employers are realizing if they just do a more formalized approach to the training and development programs for their workforce, they will have a much stronger program. They will have better quality employees and more loyal employees, and that's a huge piece of the puzzle. Now, myth number seven, we just added recently because the 21st century has brought quite a few changes in the way things are being thought of, both at the state level and the federal level. And that myth is apprenticeships are only based on hours and years of experience only. While that traditional time-based 2,000 hours of on-the-job learning and 144 hours of related instruction from either a community college or a technical college is certainly a proven method and worthwhile. The competency-based approach, where focus on quality, not just quantity, is really where a lot of the apprenticeships have taken off. In other words, if you know over any given job description that the certain milestones of a person's ability to perform at a competent level are a list of these competencies, whether it's quality, safety, or job-related production. You can list those, and as they perform those, they can be exposed to those, they can demonstrate that they've become aware of those, and then the last thing, competent in those things, and a mentor or supervisor can check those off, and that person can be measured on that competency, not just the time it took to do that. Now, a lot of companies say we still want to track the time because that's a proven approach, but we'd like to do some of that competency-based approach as well. And that's what we call a hybrid, where you combine that time-based traditional approach with some competency-based as well. and that'll continue to evolve as we move forward as well. But those are the myths that we hear out there, and I hope I've debunked most of those, if not all. Next slide. Just a brief definitions. You know, if you don't have a base of what you're talking about and working through, then everybody's off assuming that a pre-apprenticeship or an apprenticeship or a registered apprenticeship in this case are what they believe it is. These are the standard definitions from a lot of folks that have come together over the last decade, including Department of Labor, Commerce, and Education, as well as industry, that basically talk about those three levels. And I know this webinar is being recorded, and this will be shared with those folks on the webinar. So I won't read through each one, but it's really important to have those definitions at your fingertips. And again, Dave Bredenbach has done a pre-apprenticeship called PMT for about, Dave, I think 20 years almost. And that's a really great inroads to getting into an apprenticeship if somebody just wants the prerequisites to getting up to speed with those skills to get a job. Next slide. So a registered apprenticeship is different in that it is truly registered with either your state apprenticeship office or your federal, depending on which state we're in. And of course, as I talked about before, the on-the-job training or learning that goes on is a big piece of that, whether it's measured in hours or competencies. The related instruction are those things like blueprint reading and actually making parts for certain related industry standards, perhaps like NIMS or MSSC. And of course, the rewards of growing in those related instruction courses online or in the classroom or in the labs at these training institutions are basically rewarded for skills gains at their employment. And of course, those national occupational credentials, as I mentioned, whether they're welding credentials at AWS or NIMS at National Institute of Metal Working Skills or others, are part of the equation for the 21st century approach. The next slide. So why apprenticeships? Here's a few bullets that basically speak to, apprentices do honestly earn upwards of $50,000 after they've completed a program. While that may be a stretch for some of your smaller and medium-sized companies, the competition is out there for those skills. And if you don't reward those skills, it's really hard to keep a loyal and dedicated employee in your midst, as you probably all know firsthand every day. Again, 90% of those apprenticeships retain employment because of that loyalty and quality to the employer. And really, if you look at the ROI, which we'll do at the end of this webinar a little more in detail, for every dollar invested in an employee from the employer, $1.47 is in return. And if you look at the big picture across the scope of what manufacturing apprenticeship would do for the public, it's actually a $28 in benefits for the trickle-down approach for every dollar invested. And those are statistics from the Department of Labor, as you see. Very, very good investment. So if you look at the career pathway, as I mentioned, pre-apprenticeships and all the ways that you can get into an apprenticeship, whether it's a career and technical student at like Polaris or Cuyahoga Valley Career Center in this area, or a community college like Cuyahoga or Lorain, or one of your own employees, as we talked about. Of course, there's veterans that are coming back from their service and dislocated workers. It's another pool. And of course, specialized training providers across the region as well. All of those map into a possible apprenticeship program where you have paid on the job training and related instruction delivered by those institutions that I've mentioned already. And again, they can move into and embed national certification of apprenticeship completion once it's done, along with those industry recognized standards like NIMS, AWS, MSSC, etc. And as I said before, it's not one choice or the other. Most apprenticeships in this day and age are associated with degree bearing credit, and they can very quickly lead to an associate's degree and beyond. So that's a huge piece of the puzzle. It's not college or apprenticeship. It's both embedded in one. Next slide. So the collaborative approach, everywhere I go across the nation, I really bang home the drum that says, if you're not involved in your workforce education group, whether it's WireNet as a catalyst for the region in those needs, and your education community, you're really not tuned into what they can do for you and what you can do to get them to make your employment of new and incumbent workers stronger. So the industry, education, your employees, Department of Labor and unions where it's appropriate, workforce agencies like the workforce investment boards and WIOA funding that we'll talk about at the end of this as well, and of course the community-based organizations like WireNet. These are all important collaborations and partnerships that small and medium and large companies really have seen benefit from collaborating with, where they all come together. And around this apprenticeship model, it's hugely important to collaborate. Next slide. So the employer's role, real quick, is provide first to select the apprentices, whether they're from the incumbent workforce or a pool that's coming in from another source, and of course then provide the on-the-job training that goes with that in a documented way. And of course, they've got to identify a mentor or a supervisor to really work with that apprentice to make sure that they are being guided properly. That is a huge piece of that puzzle. I think that's really why we made that year part the biggest one on this screen, because the mentorship of that apprenticeship internally is huge. The next slide shows that I think the workforce development organizations, and this would of course be WireNet and others around the region, are helping recruit and screening candidates. And now we're off the PowerPoint. It's coming back, I think. But anyhow, their role is to work with the industry and make sure that all those things that are important for the apprenticeship program are taken care of. And again, to make it easier for the employer to do this apprenticeship program. And again, sometimes they can very easily find funding for the on-the-job learning that goes on or the related instruction at the college or technical center. So that's a huge piece of the puzzle. And if it's an incoming pipeline, they also provide some basic skills preparation, whether it's resume writing or teamwork or communication skills, or even that really nasty thing that everybody needs to make sure that they're drug-free and can show up on time every day. That's a huge piece of that puzzle, as everybody on the webinar knows. And WireNet and all the partners certainly work together on making sure that's part of the puzzle. The final part of this is the educational institution. In this case, Cuyahoga Community College is one of the best training providers in the region and have been for many decades. They can refer graduates for placement from pre-apprenticeship programs or other things within the college. And then they deliver, of course, the related instruction, the coursework, and some of the labs, hands-on labs that go with that to prepare those apprentices for best possible, success in the job. And again, it says they may provide college credit. The good news is Cuyahoga has been providing credit for college completion courses in the apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship for decades. So that's a great model. The next slide basically shows the benefits for employees is increased skills, higher wages. Of course, sometimes the national credentials, as I mentioned, can be part of that. Career advancement, which is really great for the employer and the employee. Of course, a safer workplace and job security with that loyalty and all that goes with that wraparound services of apprenticeship that provides. The next slide shows that the benefits for the employers are obviously you get higher skilled employees. And of course, reduced turnover costs are huge in this trying to replace people that decide they're not a good fit, or you decide they're not a good fit in a short order. Much higher productivity and fewer accidents, much more diverse workforce, and certainly you can meet requirements for certain contracts with procurement. And some of your end customers might demand in their contractual agreements with you that you have a formal training program set up so that there's continuous improvement and job-related skills being tracked. ISO compliance and all those things are part of that, and certainly apprenticeship is the number one approach to making sure that happens. And of course, improved recruiting. success stories like employee that comes in and gets this apprenticeship program, they'll be your best recruiter because they'll be very happy about the way it works for them and you. I think the next slide gets us to the fact that you can customize these. There's a lot of frameworks that we will show you after a few minutes, and they are very much the standards, but they also are customizable. No employer has the same exact needs of a CNC operator or a programmer or a mechatronics or industrial maintenance technician, but the core skills and knowledge are there. And then the customizable approach is really what the college and WireNet and other folks work with you on to make sure it's a perfect fit for you. And I think that's a perfect time to hand it over to Dave Bredenbeck to talk about how he does that at Cuyahoga. Sorry about that. I know it was working earlier today. So basically, if you look at what has happened over the last few years, the Department of Labor put out several grants in the millions of dollars, and several of the organizations we work with and partner, one especially called Robert C. Byrd Institute in West Virginia, got a very nice grant to roll out an expansion of apprenticeships. And in that, they partner with Tooling U SME, Society for Manufacturing Engineers, and developed with the Department of Labor's guidelines the competency framework. And as we talked about, that competency-based learning and approach, this is what this really fosters more than anything. And this has been in place for about 3 years now. And it focuses on, of course, safety and health, which is a huge piece of this, foundations in manufacturing, the fundamental things like blueprint reading and math skills, etc., technical expertise in whatever specific job occupation that is designed for, and we'll get into each one of those in a minute. And then people skills, which is that supervisory interaction with coworkers, as well as collaboration and communication and team building and good oral and written communication skills, etc. So that's all embedded in this competency framework approach. The next slide basically will show, let's see. So the old model, if we talked about in the earlier part of this webinar, the straight educational hours combined with the on-the-job, the 2,000 plus 144 per year is that standard. There's not, it wasn't an industry-wide standard approach like NIMS and AWS, et cetera. And individual companies were responsible for implementing that program design and managing everything, including the assessments and the on-the-job training tracking. The new approach as we move forward is, as we said, competency-based, aligned with necessary knowledge and skill requirements of your business. Of course, that then backtracks and crosswalks to the Department of Labor regulations, but they're much more understanding and flexible now, and they're certainly moving in the right direction with competency-based approach. The new frameworks allow your organization and your workforce educators to customize that program that you need. So you have a specific business need, including pre- and post-assessments addressed. And then, of course, it allows for the inclusion of technology-based and distance learning, which is where Tooling U SME does come in. That's one of their strong suits that has been for over 15 or 16 years. If we move to the next slide, it'll show what an apprenticeship acceleration framework really is. It's versatile, competency-based, and it certainly is something that Tooling U SME has worked very diligently with the Fortune 500 companies that they serve over the nation. They've got Boeing and Lockheed Martin and a lot of automotive and aerospace companies in general, but lots of small and medium-sized companies across the country as well that they've worked on customizing these frameworks that really make a difference for tracking the development of the organizational needs and the instructional design for the educators involved, and also the employees' skills and knowledge gain that go forward. They have over 500 online courses that are mapped to those needs. They have 60 instructor-led courses and hundreds of books and videos from the SME, 80 years plus of being in business, working with industry. Obviously, they have certification programs and lean and additive manufacturing now and many other things. And they do customize their content for individual needs. Next slide talks about that whole continuum we talked about earlier in that the pre-apprenticeship, working with people like the Robert C. Byrd Institute, getting women and folks that are not ever really traditional manufacturing employees in the pipeline of experiencing the fact they can very quickly learn the necessary skills to get up to speed to get into a full-fledged apprenticeship program at companies. They do the assessment on the front end and the back end of what they're learning, so they see their gain, and that's all done online and tracked. And then, of course, they get into manufacturing competency frameworks, everything from CNC to additive manufacturing. I'll show you that list in a minute. Then they go on, and Dave, when he comes back, will show how he maps some of that maybe with the apprenticeship learning that goes on in the classroom and the shop floor. And basically, what the online classes from Tooling U give you, both in the education environment and the work environment, are extra capacity because it's done usually at the employer's own time. And of course, all of that's being tracked and documented on the learning management system that goes with that system. The next slide basically shows how that continuum goes through with leading and developing people and moving into their technical expertise designed for whatever skill or occupation you're looking for, coupled with the health and safety along the way, built in with foundations in manufacturing and making sure that those knowledge and skills are job ready for your workforce moving forward. It's a stackable approach. Here's an example of the 21st century framework for a CNC operator programmer. And once this comes back on, we'll look at that in a little more detail. But it's a grid that basically shows the on-the-job learning and what that number of hours or competencies are, and also the related instruction that goes with that from the training provider like Cuyahoga Community College in this example. Don't you just love Microsoft? Sometimes they just don't know when to leave you alone. Okay, so you see that the RTI, which is related technical instruction hours, are listed in the first column, and the on-the-job training hours are listed on the right-hand column. And both of those go toward those competencies in everything from bench work, in this case, to work-holding devices, sawing fundamentals, drilling, milling, turning, all those fundamentals that are important to small and medium-sized companies. So that's just one example of a 2-year apprenticeship, or a year 2 apprenticeship program, I should say, in the technical expertise area. Next slide. So basically, here's another slide that shows, the technical training plans are all documented. The job skills qualification standards are all documented and part of the program. So you don't ever have to wonder how folks are doing. This is all majorly documented online, as well as in compliance with your ISO certifications, as well as DOL's needs if you're a registered apprenticeship in this scenario. The next slide. Here's a list over the last 3 years of occupation and framework titles that have been developed. A lot of these probably map to some of the needs of the folks on the webinar, everything from CNC operators and programmers to machinists and maintenance technicians, process technicians, quality control, electricians, and tool and die, welding. And some of the special ones that were added during the last year were press operators, cold stamping and hot stamping, and even assembly technician. The 3 brand new frameworks that are being developed right now and almost ready for approval by DOL are the robotics technician, the 3D printing and additive technician, and there's another one that is, where'd it go? Composites technician, the second bullet at the top. Those 3 are brand new and are being worked on with industry and educators right now with DOL's approval going forward, and they'll be ready for launch probably by June. An example on the next slide, I believe I have, is the 3D printing additive technician framework that we partnered with over the last 3 years. Tooling U led that organization I represent. The NCHC was a big part of making sure colleges across the nation were involved, as well as industries. America Makes, which is the first Manufacturing USA Institute in Youngstown, is a big part of that. You see Cuyahoga Community College, which is front and center with additive manufacturing in our region. We've got an amazing program that has been built around these standards, as well as a body of knowledge from America Makes and SME. Milwaukee School of Engineering, which is a career pathway approach, so that everything that's being done at this level in technicians moves into the engineering role very seamlessly. And a group out of Washington State about materials science for additive manufacturing. And you see a great list of folks, companies on the right-hand side that were also a subset of being involved in this development. So it's a very well vetted apprenticeship framework for additive manufacturing. And if anybody's interested in that, version 3, as we're rolling it out, I can work with WireNet to get it in your hands as a draft, so you can see it in advance. Next slide. Real quick, I want to talk on return on investment, and Dave will probably have a few things that he can share from, being on the ground level every day with employers. But how much is the skills gap costing your business is what I want to just talk about briefly. The next slide shows a few examples of how you can work in the return on investment. Again, I said up front, if you don't train them and they stay, that's a much worse scenario than if you train them and they might leave. I think it's up to every employer, small, medium, and large, to create the culture that it really is something that's part of your fabric, that training is never ending, and it is part of why you want people to stay, is that they continually improve. The next slide kind of talks about the cost of training. If you look at how sustainable these dollars are, if you look at a machine that's not running, it's $100 an hour times 2,000 hours per year. You could lose, if you didn't have somebody to run that machine, over a couple $100,000 of revenue. And a lot of times, as you all know on the webinar from industry, sometimes an operator runs 2 machines. So if you double that, it could be even worse. So it's really easy to do some basic return on investments, but I think what I want to share is the next couple slides show you some really nice online tools that you can get to. This one's from ADP, the payroll folks, and you can see that URL at the bottom of the screen at adp.com, and you can go out and look at that and just kind of fill in the blanks that from your HR department's work on advertising your position, how much it costs them to do that, the cost to interview, and while you're doing all that, the productivity loss that comes while that job is not filled, and of course possibly a relocation cost for the current or future employee, and of course the cost of training. And that'll give you a pretty good calculation of cost of a bad hire if you don't train and keep track of those things. The next slide shows another resource for return on investment from the National Association of Curriculum Consortium, and they give you a link there at costofhire.com, ROI. That's another one you can get started on and look at your variables and fill that in. There's one more that I want to share, I think, on slide number. Nope, I guess it's not. But DOL, I think, and Department of Commerce also have calculators that will help you out. But if you look at taking advantage of digital technologies, like tooling you online classes for employees, and you collaborate with great institutions like Cuyahoga and Lorain Community College in this area to help fill that pipeline, and you make sure your standards are built around, certification programs like NIMS or MSSC or AWS, where that's appropriate for your institution, then you can really build a strong apprenticeship program that's documented and really continues to expand your candidate pool, really from hiring more of a potential fit than the perfect fit. We move on to the next slide. I think we need to go back with Dave, and he'll give you some great examples of what's going on in his programs at Cuyahoga Community College. And I look forward to questions at the end. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Craig. Sorry about that technical difficulty. Can you hear? Am I coming through?
Yes, you are.
You're coming through.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Just want to talk to you a little bit about our machining programs we have here at Cuyahoga Community College. Craig mentioned a little bit on our pre-apprenticeship. We can move to the next slide. Pre-apprenticeship is what we call a precision machine technology program, and it's really where a lot of apprentices get their start. There's different avenues for someone to come into the trade. You can come in through career tech schools. You can come in through community colleges. What we like about our precision machine technology is that it not only gives a person who's never really had any familiarity with the trade, you kind of start from the very beginning. It gives them a good foundation to come into a company. It's 28 weeks long, 50% of it's hands-on, a lot of shop work. We have both manual and CNC machines that are used in the 2-semester course. It's college credit, so a person can use those credits towards the apprenticeship. It'll give them the first year of his related technical instruction hours. And like Craig said, we've been doing it over 20 years. We've graduated hundreds and hundreds of folks every year. So we average about 80 students in a calendar year, and we move them through the pre-apprenticeship into companies, and then they can go into the apprenticeship program. We'll go to the next slide. Our machine trades apprenticeship, it's your traditional 4-year apprenticeship program. Folks that go from either career tech schools or an employer that has an employee they feel is good to go into the program can move right in. The key thing on that, even though the traditional, the 4-year program, it's evolved over time. We've actually have it where if a person has the skills to test out on some of the basic math, if they went through a career tech program, if any of your employees went through Polaris, Cuyahoga Valley, a career tech school, or through the precision machining program, or say at Lorain, a similar program, they can start right in year 2. They would be able to skip year 1 and test out. But the traditional program is set up so that you can get your 576 hours of RTI. You get the 4 years of work experience. It's 2,000 hours a year. And then 44 of the credits can go towards an AAS degree. We have an applied industrial technology degree that is a person would do their apprenticeship training, and then they would just need to take the gen ed classes, which is about 20 credits to finish up and get that. And a lot of companies and a lot of the apprentices that we work with, they're high-level guys. They want to be challenged. They'll get to a point working in the shop where there might be a supervisor position come up, and that might require an associate's degree, and they're right there. So it works out really well. And like I said, the program went credit in 1999, but it actually was started in the late 80s. So we've been doing it for many, many years. We'll go to the next slide. Collaboration. We work with, basically being the community college, we're open to work with anybody that can help promote workforce training and advancement in apprenticeships. WireNet and Tri-C is currently working on a hybrid apprenticeship for machine trades and industrial maintenance. Cuyahoga Community College was one of the first adopters for Tooling U's online curriculum. We use it in our apprenticeship. When an apprentice comes in, he gets a 1-year subscription to Tooling U, all access. It's like 500 classes. It doesn't matter if he's doing work in the shop that's related to the classroom stuff he might be doing in the apprenticeship, or it's something completely new. He has access to all that material. We also have been using the Tooling U in our PMT, our Precision Machine Technology pre-apprenticeship, for over 15 years. So it's kind of like a hybrid in the way that we apply online training with both the apprenticeship and the pre-apprenticeship, but it's a good foundation for the student because it's 24-hour all access. He can kind of look at it when he needs to, if he's doing something new at work, or he can use it as a backup for the actual curriculum he's doing in the classroom. Tri-C also works with a lot of the local career tech centers. We do a Skills USA contest for CNC out at Haas and Twinsburg, and that brings in all the local career tech schools to see who's the best CNC student. And we also do a manual. We call it a super regional. It's all the career tech schools north of Columbus, and they do one south of Columbus at Sinclair University or Sinclair Community College. And That's kind of neat. You get to see, it's a top student in each of the different schools, and they're representing the school to see if they can go to the state and nationals for Skills USA. One thing I have to say, if you are looking for employees, the career tech centers are fantastic. I mean, they really bring the folks along to a point where they can leave high school. Now they can leave high school 6 weeks or 3 months early and get right into a company and work part-time until they graduate. And they're just outstanding because they have a good, strong background, and they're young, and they're kind of motivated to get everything as far as building skills towards becoming a journeyman. Okay, we'll switch to the next slide. And just a few quotes on future trends. We see a lot of automation. We see a lot of automation in smaller companies. Industrial maintenance, mechatronics technician is probably one of the hardest guys to find out there now, even tougher than tool makers and CNC guys, because it takes a lot of electronics, a lot of math, a lot of special training to get to the level for automation. But automation is changing what's happening in not just the large factories, but we see it even in small stamping plants. They're using robots. They're using automation to make, just to be more relevant and increase the productivity. I think in the future, companies will need multiple levels of mentors and apprentices. Craig alluded a little bit to the mentor part. You can't understate how important a company for them to have strong mentors as they develop these apprentices, because in a lot of ways, the schooling has a part, but it's what the guy does on the job. I mean, it's the key difference. It's kind of what makes the guy be a really strong problem solver or a strong tool maker is what kind of mentors he has. And for some of these young guys, you need someone that has confidence in them when they struggle. And that's kind of the whole thing of apprenticeships through the ages is, you had somebody that kind of believed in you even if you didn't, and carried you through the tough times. And that's really a key to developing strong tool makers and journeymen. So the last thing on the career pathways, it seems like some of the, at least folks I talk to on a daily basis that are looking to go into the trade, they really need to see it laid out pretty clearly as far as what opportunities there are and also compensation. They don't have as long a time frame, I think, as some from the baby boomer generation. They kind of look at things in a shorter time frame, but they really, they're willing to try something, and if it doesn't work, they're going to pivot and they're going to try something else. So you have to really be clear on what opportunities are available, and I think it makes it a lot easier for them to take on the challenge or try something new when they know kind of what they're in for. So, okay, I'll turn it over back. I think I'm just going to head to Mike Hogue, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about some more on the apprenticeship. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, David. Just wanted to introduce WireNet established what we're calling the Northeast Ohio Manufacturing Apprenticeship Consortium in 2016. And it's designed to provide a group sponsorship framework under which employers can access and engage in apprenticeship training. We believe it's a platform that offers many advantages and benefits to individual employer versus the individual employer sponsorship model, and supports your ability to accelerate the launch of a formal apprenticeship program. We try to take the hassle out of the equation, connect you to resources, and allow you to focus your energies on OJT training components. Candidate flow is another area that we see as a critical concern of local manufacturers and having access to that talent. David mentioned some of the pre-apprenticeship work that Tri-C is doing that targets a lot of adult populations. We're trying to embed pre-apprenticeship programming directly into the high schools using the career tech high schools in the region, starting with a long-standing partnership we've had at Max Hayes, where we're currently developing a launch of a state-recognized pre-apprenticeship program in machining that'll give students a leg up and give consortium member companies access to a pre-qualified candidate pool for their apprenticeship openings. So I'll be happy to talk with you if any of you are interested in getting started in using NOMAC. Advance to the next slide. Again, there's a growing support system emerging here in Northeast Ohio for manufacturing apprenticeships. David represents a host of programs, as he mentioned, through Tri-C. Other regional partners like Lorain County Community College have also been engaged in supporting apprenticeships for manufacturing firms in Western Cuyahoga and Lorain County. These are just a list of some of the current program options that are available through both of our community college partnerships, as well as the two current programs that WireNet is recognized as a group sponsor for with the State Apprenticeship Council. So if any of these touch on areas where you have needs, feel free to give us a call. As as Craig mentioned, Tooling U is another wealth of information and has a broad range of versatile competency-based learning options, and is happy to partner up with either WireNet, Tri-C, or directly with an employer to help connect them to those resources. So with that, advance to the next slide. We wanted to leave some time for questions. I'm not sure if people have managed to navigate the conversation panel to type in any potential questions that they have.
We do have one question, Mike. Sonia Turner asks, do you know of any apprenticeships for the construction industry?
I can answer from the Tri-C side.
Go ahead.
We have a whole construction trades apprenticeship program here that's built on the JATC model. It's actually a union-based model, but I can get information to Sonia and anything for those folks that might be interested on the construction side through Tri-C. Tri-C is actually one of the largest construction apprenticeship consortiums in the state of Ohio.
I can also say that Max Hayes does have a state-recognized pre-apprenticeship program in the building trades. It's what we've been modeling our manufacturing pre-apprenticeship program after. That's underway. It also includes a recent partnership they formed with the Sheet Metal Workers Union to provide students access to their training resources under a pre-apprenticeship training umbrella. So we certainly can connect you up with additional resources on areas of construction industry options for apprenticeship. I did want to also mention, we touched on a bit, but Tri-C and WireNet are excited to be partnered up as part of a state effort to expand the apprenticeship platform across the state. And so they've launched an initiative designed to create a community college apprenticeship consortium, which has included some seed money that the community colleges can offer to employers to help offset the launch of apprenticeship training that employers want to embark upon. So currently there's up to $2,500 of funding available that can offset the costs of the related technical instruction, books, if there's any tools or equipment or work clothes that an individual may need is part of their apprenticeship program. All of those are eligible costs that can be underwritten using this state expansion grant. If companies are interested in learning more about how to connect with those resources, myself or David Bredenbeck can tell you more about how that program is set up and how you can take advantage of that opportunity to get your program started. So it's an excellent resource that the state is using to really prime the pump and get more companies to revisit the use of the apprenticeship platform. If there's any additional questions that come in from participants, you can see there's multiple ways that you can access any of us that have been presenting on this topic today. Either give us a call or send us an email. We'll be happy to respond to those questions. If there aren't any further, what I'll do is just want to thank our presenters today, Craig McAtee and David Bredenbeck, for sharing their time and their expertise with our audience this morning. We truly value both as partners of WireNet. We want to thank you, our participants, for attending today's webinar. We hope you feel a little bit more equipped to consider apprenticeship within your organization. And with each of our contact information listed below on this slide, feel free to reach out to any of us for additional information or how to take that next step. WireNet's got an ever-growing calendar of events, so please continue to check our website for what's coming up. I'll put a short plug in that our 30th anniversary annual meeting will be held on April 26th at the Renaissance downtown. We're really excited that we've recently heard Mayor Jackson will be joining us for that. So it's a not-miss event, and you can access information about how to register for that or any of our other upcoming events on our website. So check that out at www.wire-net.org. With that, I will again thank you for joining us today, and please enjoy the rest of your day.